another edition of the ABCs of CPD and CFD. And if you don't know what that is, the ABCs of Columbus Police Department and Columbus Fire Department, trying to find out why they do what they do in the community and beyond. And so we've got another great program for you this evening. Our first segment, we're going to be talking about narcotics and prostitution and how we deal with that, and also always with the fire department, what's going on there. And then on the second segment, we're going to be talking about disaster preparedness. How do we prepare? How does police and fire units and then also other resources like the Columbus Health Department and Red Cross, how do they deal with those issues, and which they have recently been put into action here in our great city in the past couple of months. We're going to be talking about that also. Want to make sure you have the opportunity to give us a call and ask the questions at 645-6557. That's 645-6557. You can also check us out on Facebook at NAPBell. That's NAPBELL. Make sure you check us out there. Ask those questions there if you aren't able to call in at this time. It's also live streaming on the web. So if you're not able to see us now, check us out on the web, and it's live streaming and also has the replays. So let's get started with ABCs of Police and Fire. And you know, this time we're doing this one a little different. We've got a new co-host to the show who's with us today, and she's out of Otterbein University. She's going to be a junior this year. We have Ms. Sherelle Hines. I'd like to welcome you to the program.
Pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
You're going to be asking some of the questions
yes,
there, too.
I am.
You know, you're a journalism and broadcast major.
Yes.
So I think I might just sit back and just let you do the whole show because, you know, you're the professional here, right?
Sure, you can say that, you know.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're going to be on the whole show, you know, asking some questions. And she's interning in our office, and it's a great thing. So we're real happy to have her as part of the program. So let me just go ahead and start also speaking with our guest. I don't know if you've been on the show this with us before or not, but Commander Cameron. I'd like to welcome you to the program, the head of the Narcotics and Vice Unit. And I think I've got to get my microphone here. Head of the Narcotics and Vice Unit with the Columbus Division of Police. I'd like to welcome you to the program. We've got a lot of questions for you to ask, or for us to ask of you, especially Cheryl. And then, lo and behold, we know down there at the end, you know, the staple of the program. The standby of the program.
Glad to be here. I felt like applauding when Michelle was here. I'm glad she's here. She can help you out a lot.
I tell you, I need the help. And you need the help. So
yes, I do.
So we'd like to welcome you, as always, to the program, talking about some of the fire issues that we got going on, especially in the second segment.
Thank you for having me again.
I tell you, let's get started, you know, because a lot of the questions and a lot of the things that are going on in the city, you know, revolve around prostitution and narcotics. And so let me get things started, and then Sharon, I'm going to have you want you to jump in also. But, you know, with narcotics just in general, you know, well, let me take that back. Let me start with prostitution because that's been a common complaint that several communities are dealing with. And so let me ask you this: what is the prostitution? Why does that continue to be a problem in some communities? I mean, it seems like the prostitutes, you know, they go to jail and they get back out. They go to jail and they get back out. Talk to us about that.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. We see it too, and it's frustrating, I think, for not just the community but the officers as well. And I think over the years we've realized that just putting people in jail isn't going to solve the prostitution problem. We needed a more comprehensive approach. After all, you know, the females and the males that we arrest, you know, don't aspire to that life of crime. There's something that's happened in their lives to get there. And we now are partnering with the court system through Catch Court to try to get the services to the females that need it the most.
Catch Court, and that's with the Judge
Herbert.
He
initiated Catch Court, created it, and I think last year was their first year where they successfully graduated some people out of his program. Some females who have gone on to get college degrees and great jobs and walked beyond the life that they had been living.
Wow, that's a tremendous success. And before we go on, I know we've got a caller on the line, so let us get with that caller, and then we're going to go back to another question with you. Great. Caller, are you there with your question or your comment?
Yes.
Go ahead, caller.
Yes, I have a question for, I'm assuming it is the lieutenant. I'm a block watch captain, and I live on the Near East Side of Columbus, and we've been battling prostitution in a particular area that not only is becoming, they're becoming very aggressive, but there's some health concerns also. And we've been told that Vice no longer works street prostitution. So I'm wondering what we as community then can do.
Great question. Thank you, caller. Commander?
Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to answer that. And I think the information that he received may have been bad information. In fact, Chief Jacobs has made it a top priority of hers to combat street prostitution. We look at all various types of prostitution issues. But the street prostitution, I think we get the most calls, the most concerns from the neighborhoods. And so what I encourage callers to do is to call our Vice Squad. It's in the phone book, or it's 645-4750. If someone doesn't answer, please leave a message. We do have an answering machine on there. Every day someone answers or listens to those messages. They create a complaint for officers to go out and work. So I just encourage them to keep calling.
Great.
And Commander, how can we see the difference between prostitution and human trafficking? How can we educate others to see the red flags in regards to human trafficking?
Human trafficking is not necessarily what people might think it is. I think in the past it was this idea that someone would bring females over from other foreign countries and keep them in indentured servitude inside their homes and prostitute them. I'm sure that occurs in our country in various places, but we don't see very much of that here. When we talk about human trafficking in Columbus, what we're really referring to are females that have had something happen in their lives, whether they've become addicted to narcotics, they've had some violence in their lives where they feel controlled, manipulated by people, and they're forced into this life of prostitution. And we've really had to challenge ourselves as a police department to stop looking at prostitutes purely as suspects to go out and arrest. We also have to look at them as victims. And so we make an effort whenever we encounter someone who may be a victim of human trafficking to interact with them and try to encourage them to seek help. And we'll offer them that help there on the spot. As far as helping them from a community perspective, if you have a loved one, you have a family member you've lost contact with, there's somebody controlling them, or if they have a drug habit, speak up and tell someone and call us even. We'll even go out and look for them. We've had several occasions where family members called and said, we've lost contact with our daughter. We think that she's staying in a hotel here doing these things, and we've gone and knocked on the door and said, can we help you? Instead of just going out and trying to put them in jail, which really doesn't solve the underlying problems.
Thank you.
So it sounds like you're talking about, really addressing on a long term, addressing those problems that are underlying rather than just going to jail. Okay, what's the root cause here? Why is this person doing that? And we need to address that. So how you talked about calling in, when someone calls in, what should they say? Because so often, you might hear, well, there's a prostitute on that corner. Is there some specifics that they should give? What would be most helpful to the officer on the other line when calling in about this prostitution complaint?
Sure. Well, I see two types. I see the type where the community or the caller is concerned with the immediate problem. For instance, there's somebody on the street corner, they're being aggressive, or they're doing more than just standing there flagging cars. In those situations, we would encourage them to call the police radio room and ask for a police cruiser to come look at the situation. Because there could be many, many other things occurring there. And so we want an officer in a uniform there as quickly as possible to deal with the issue. If it's a community problem where a community leader recognizes that at 5 o'clock every day, a certain person's out there standing on the street corner, we suspect that they're engaged in prostitution, they can call and leave us a message and state, it really, really helps, one, to know the location, and most people are good with that, but the time of day, and then a general description of the person too. And what we'll do from there is we'll assign that to a vice detective. They'll go out and investigate it and try to not just make an arrest, but also try to get those services to the person that needs them.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Yes. Over the years, Commander, how has the police force continued to make Columbus a safer place in regards to prostitution and narcotics, to make it a premier place to live for families?
Well, safety really begins with the community. And a long time ago, the father of modern policing said, "The police are us, and we are the police." And I think in translation, what that means is that we have to interact with the community, and the community has to have a means to interact with us. After all, there are only less than 2,000 officers for a community that swells to over 1 million during the day. And so without support, without help, and without input from the community, we couldn't possibly do what we do. The division has done a good job over the years of fostering and partnering with block watch groups and safety groups, and through that we're able to increase our effectiveness and our trust.
Well, let me follow up with that then, because I often hear, and also Lieutenant Sawyer, you might chime in on this too, is you hear that prostitution is a victimless crime. The prostitution, it's legal in Vegas. In some areas of Vegas, in some areas it's legal. So why is it illegal, here to do that? Why they say it's a victimless crime. Is it a victimless crime? And then also to you, Lieutenant Sawyer, what do you see out there? I mean, I'm sure, you have some emergency runs on, those who are in prostitution for one reason or another. What kind of things are you seeing?
It's very unfortunate that mindset's out there. I mean, beyond the fact that the females engaged in prostitution typically have some underlying need for services, whether they're drug addicted or abused or have some condition that they need help with. People who make those kind of crude statements, it's a victimless crime, why should we care? They've never had, gone into their backyard or into the alley and found, used prophylactics and things sitting out there where children are at play. They've never had a loved one who's been involved in that kind of lifestyle, and they've probably never had a loved one who's brought home some kind of transmitted disease because of prostitution. So to say it's victimless, I think, is not really looking at the complete picture.
Yeah, I would agree with the Commander. It is not a victimless crime. I think in the business of the fire department, whether it's fire suppression or emergency medical, I'm willing to bet that she's doing her business in probably a vacant and abandoned property. Now, especially in the wintertime or winter months, how is she keeping warm in there? Is she setting a fire or something to keep warm in the trash can and then leaves that fire? We may have a fire that. I don't have any probably actual data to prove that, but also even on the medical side, okay, the illness and the injuries from this crime, injuries, assaults, whether the John or beats her up or she, beats him up and commits a robbery against him, and then the illnesses, from especially the drug use, hepatitis, IV drug usage, things like that. So we will be getting those runs all the time on the medical side.
So there's a cost factor also.
Oh, absolutely.
So not only is there's it is victimless, but also those who are taxpayers, whatever, are victims of this type of behavior because of the impact on costs with response, police response, and hospital stays, et cetera, et cetera. Now, one thing I know you've got a question there, Sherelle, but one thing I just want I'm hearing she and her. Do we have male prostitutes out there that are doing the same thing? And is there a good percentage out there in the city or no? And also young, and the age, what's our age range here?
We don't really make an effort to categorize them that way.
Okay.
But we have arrested we've arrested females and males for prostitution alike. We also every year make an effort to go out and attack or address the Johns issue, those are the men who are actually seeking out the sex. So we try to get them too by conducting reversals, where we put a police officer out on the street corner and kind of lure them in, I guess you could say. But yeah, we arrest all kinds, and so we don't really keep track of the exact numbers.
Okay, sure.
And I've done research at Otterbein. I've actually done a paper on prostitution and human trafficking, and I found out that the average age is usually 13. They're starting out young, and I was working with parents working hard hours at home and children staying home unsupervised. what are some of the specific tactics used to stop youth violence and keeping our kids safe and off the streets?
Sure. And I understand that most parents today have to work hard and long hours to make ends meet, and we're sensitive to that. But I think the thing that I want to encourage parents is that don't be afraid to ask the questions. When you have teenagers, they're exploring life. They're of the age where that occurs, and parents shouldn't be afraid to ask them where they are, who they're with, is there a parent home? That doesn't necessarily relate to just prostitution. That's just across the board. And then after you've asked those questions, don't be afraid to be a little bit suspicious and check up on them. After all, our kids' safety is more important than earning that paycheck. And so we want to make sure that parents, feel empowered to ask those questions.
Well, Commander, I've got to, we got to break in here because, I know the community always, we get emails and we check online and we get some calls or questions there and also through Facebook. So I got to ask you one of the Facebook questions. Is actually from, let's see here, Mike. And Mike says, can I carry a pellet gun legally? So it's not a firearm, but can I carry a pellet gun legally?
Yes, but why?
I don't know. We'll have to ask Mike. Mike, why did you want to know that?
It's not considered a firearm, but I guess I would just have to ask why.
Yeah.
I think that when people feel that they need to carry a pellet gun, then I worry that what does this pellet gun look like? Is it
right?
Do you recognize it as a pellet gun? Because there are a lot of these things, these toys out there that can be easily mistaken for something different. And the last thing that we want to have happen is for there to be a tragedy because somebody's walking around with a pellet gun and somebody else had something bigger.
Right.
And so we don't want that to happen.
Right. And I would think that would work. That's pretty dangerous because whether it's the police officer that sees him with a pellet gun or the community, the bad guy sees him with the pellet gun, it's going to be pretty dangerous for that person to be carrying that.
Right, exactly. Well, I got to do one more here. Also, I'm not sure who this is from. It says, I see guys carrying knives on their waistband. Is that legal? And if it is, what's the maximum length that they can carry? So you do, and I see it too. They see those.
Can I carry a sword?
No, I don't know if you carry a sword.
Only your samurai suit.
Oh, my samurai suit. If I come out ninja, I'm okay.
Right.
With knives, it's a little different because a knife really is, for some people, a tool, something they work with. I think where people cross the line and where they shouldn't be carrying knives if they're carrying a knife as a weapon. If they're carrying it as a weapon and if they're using it for protection and they're concealing it, then that would be illegal. And in Columbus, it's a misdemeanor of the first degree. So it doesn't rise to the level of a felony yet, but just carrying it concealed and carrying it as a weapon, I think that they're running the risk of being arrested.
Okay. Good deal. Charlotte, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. According to cityrating.com, Columbus crime statistics report an overall downward trend in violent crimes and that this year's crime report is expected to be lower than 2009. So how would you credit the Columbus Police Department and their tactics to this downward trend?
One thing is for sure that the Columbus Police Department is relentless in their research and their pursuit of violent crime. We take violent crime very seriously. For instance, with our research, we know through crime statistics the areas and the times where most violence occurs. We also know that there are people out there in our community who make a career out of crime. And so we purposely target those areas and those people. Right now we have what's called we have several community response teams, and their mission out there is to look at those areas of violent crime and address the problems from a neighborhood level all the way up to the individual level. Chief Jacobs this year has also put out officers on overtime in a summer initiative to reinforce and supplement what the community response teams are doing. And I think through those efforts that we've done for the last several years, we can see that it has an effect on violent crime.
Well, I got to switch gears, going from commander to the lieutenant.
Okay.
You know, and once again, you know, I've got to resort to the pictures or the questions from the emails and Facebook and what have you.
Don't ask me a hard one.
Not a hard one. Well,
Okay, give me an easy one.
they're probably all hard
For me,
for you. And I think we've done this before, but at sometimes it takes the firefighters, you know, 3 to 5 minutes to get to a location. Well, to paraphrase, what are the parameters or what affects the firefighter's response time in that particular community?
What affects the response time, or really the national trend is that 3 to 5 minute standard time.
So that's a good
That's
time.
actually a good time. Yes,
Okay.
accreditation requires that for us to have that response time. When we start getting into 8 minutes, 10 minutes, that's too long a time. I think what is important about that is for like the progression of a fire. In the first 3 to 5 minutes, or really 5 to 15 minutes, a fire has been spreading before you've even called us. So you're thinking, you know, that as soon as the fire happens, somebody called the fire department and we're on our way. Well, that's not what's really happening, okay? The fire started, you didn't recognize it, you go out there and to investigate it, and sometimes you do the wrong things. You decide to fight the fire yourself instead of calling 911. That is time progression that you waited, and the fire has spread. But our trends are very good, both for emergency medical and for fire suppression, or really for any emergency incident. We are able to get to you in less than 5 minutes, and that's really a proven fact. And I think really that the reason why we are able to do that is logistically, we have fire stations and apparatus positioned around the city, all around, so that we can respond in that time. And we have an agreement with townships and suburban areas, mutual aid companies that can help us with that.
Great. Well, I've got one question also for the commander, because thinking about this too, and we haven't gotten on it very much through this conversation. It's narcotics.
Sure.
You know, the sale of narcotics on the street corners, out of the houses, out of the cars. Community members saying, hey, you know, I've called 20 times or I've called 5 times and nobody's done anything about this. You know, what's the process? I mean, because somebody says, well, I've called 5 times. Is there something that you know, that more information that they need to give, or should they continue to call back? Because some people say, I'm tired of calling. You know, I've called. So what do we tell the community to be able to better address narcotics in their community?
Right. My first response is always, if nothing else, call the radio room, the 645-4545 number, and ask for a police cruiser to come out. That's really it should be a one-stop shop as far as services for the police department. So if the patrol officer is not able to address the situation immediately, whether it be a guy on the corner or a guy out in front of the house, you know, I think that they could stop and talk with that person and ascertain whether they're involved in drug activity, and make an arrest if they can. But if that officer is not able to address that, he or she certainly knows there are other resources available. I spoke earlier about the community response teams, and they are terrific at dealing with street-level drug activity. And that's part of their mission right now, as well as violent crime, is to deal with street-level drugs. We know there's a nexus between the two, between drugs and violent crime. And if it's just a house, if you suspect that one of your neighbors is dealing drugs out of their house, you certainly can call the Columbus Narcotics Department. The number is 645-4616. And again, during the day, we have someone answering those phones. If no one answers, please leave a message. And it really helps to know, you know, the address of the house. Hey, they're going in and out of the back door, and this is what I think they're doing. And if they give that information to us, it takes a couple weeks, but we'll get around, and we have to investigate. So we can't just knock on the door and say, hey, you're doing something illegal, knock it off.
Right.
Although people would like us to do that. But, you know, really, this is a felony type crime, and we want to investigate it thoroughly so when we go to court, we can effectively prosecute these people and put them in jail.
Yeah, see, because I think, you know, when somebody calls in, their expectation is the troops are going to come in and bust in the door. Right. But what I'm hearing is that they're just going to, you know, you're going to have that person to call, or not to call him, but you have that person to that you're going to be investigating plain clothes. You're not going to send the troops in.
Oh, absolutely.
So you're going to try to.
Well, we'll send the troops. I mean, especially
eventually.
If there's something bad going on, please call. Don't just leave a message. Call and ask for a uniformed response if something bad is occurring.
Right then. But if it's narcotic or the going to the back door, leaving going to the back door, call the narcotics line, and they'll come and investigate kind of covertly. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely.
And then they'll do the.
And I want to put a plug out there because we get mistaken for SWAT a lot, but within the Narcotics Bureau we have a tactical team, and their mission, 40 hours a week, is to go out and tackle what we refer to as drug houses. And so those officers do the investigation, do all the paperwork, go get a search warrant signed by the judge, and then the next day they're dressed up in black tactical gear kicking in the door.
Yeah, so you talked about a process even there that you have to go through in order to do this legally.
So I don't doubt that there are things that slip through the cracks, and I just want to encourage people to keep calling. But it does take time.
Don't give up.
Yeah, please.
Don't give up. And don't give up calling on our line because we understand we have a caller on the line. Caller, are you there with your question or your comment?
Yes.
Go ahead, caller.
Hi, my name is Natanja. I'm calling to see what your response is on people who have road rage.
Road rage. Thank you for your question, caller. You know, road rage, that's something that we didn't talk about. How do we deal with that?
It gets even worse in the summer heat when there's no air conditioning, you're sitting in traffic, and, you know, road rage is kind of a new phenomenon, and you know, we deal with it as best we can by, you know, sending the troops out there on the street when someone calls. But, you know, it never ends well when you get so angry you feel you need to get out of your car and approach someone. And so it's hard to do. I understand that. Stay in your car, turn the radio up a little bit louder, keep going, go home, because we want you to make it home safely. We don't want the fire department and the policemen showing up at the scene. And the reality is, today you just don't know, and you just don't know who you're dealing with. And if nothing else, by you stepping out of your car into a busy street, you know, those cars weigh a lot and they're going really fast, and we don't want you to get hit.
I can ask everyone to have patience with each other.
Sure.
Have patience. You know, even the bad guy that's, you know, mad at somebody in front of him, I'm asking him to have patience.
Exactly.
Right. Deal with it.
10 minutes later, it's over, and you're going to forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. Where are you going? Home or to work? You'll get there.
Right.
And I just have one last question. You can answer this too, Lieutenant.
Okay.
What are the major problems and obstacles standing in the way of a safer Columbus?
Well, I'll take that. In both the prostitution and the narcotics, or really even in fire department issues, I think the community is looking for enforcement. They're looking for a quick fix, pick you up and take you to jail. The other one, I think I'd rather see you be involved in your community, be an advocate in your community, work on education, trying to change behavior and culture, and that may change the quality of life in the city.
And I would just reiterate that and say, encourage people to speak up. Tell someone, and if you're talking about drugs or drug addiction, you don't have to necessarily tell the police. Tell the parent, tell a friend, tell someone what you suspect is going on, and let's try to get people help.
Great. Well, we thank you for your time, and it sounds like that you know, a lot of what we've talked about is the underlying of these issues is narcotic related in a sense. You know, whether it be prostitution and also the narcotic sales. And then I keep hearing community's input, you know, parental input. So, you know, you talk about it takes all of them to be able to really make this a long-term change in the community. And so that's what I think we really got to try to work on. And before we go off the air, I think we have one more call that we're going to get to here on this great segment. Caller, are you there with your question or your comment?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
We have a couple of houses on our street that have been in the drug and prostitution business. In fact, it is a one-stop crime shop. The mother of the house has 5 felons, 3 prostitutes, 2 heroin dealers. She does Oxycontin. We have called hundreds of times in the last 9 to 10 years, not months, years. We've been told basically that they can't get 2 buys in that length of time. We see literally 50 people walking up a day. We've been told the videotapes are not enough because we can't prove what that person licked off the cellophane once it was given to them in exchange for money. We don't have scratch and sniff video, in case the police department and the prosecutor was wondering. It doesn't seem like it's ever enough information. We gave times of day, and in fact there are no times of day. It's like 7 to midnight. But it goes on and on and on. And we're told, well, you know, you're not a big enough fish. This is really not a big problem, except that they are completely ruining our neighborhood. Kids are not safe in their own house. In fact, the grandmother, again, the mother of the 5 criminals, has 5 or 10 grandchildren in her care. Children's Services simply said they didn't have enough furniture. That was the real problem in that household. And yet, again, this has been documented for now nearly a decade.
Great comment, and understandably, you know, an issue with frustration. You can hear it in the voice of the community. And it's kind of like what we talked about that repeatedly calling. And she had stated, yeah, you know, I've called so many times. And I guess, you know, to what your point was, Commander, was to continue to call, but give as specific information as possible, so that, and then also, you know, continue with it, because there will be those persons who are doing that investigation. It sounds like, so is there a way that she can, you know, maybe this caller can call into that line that you talked about, the 645-4616,
right,
and maybe could she mention you or something, so that, you know, since she's seen you on TV, kind of work with her on this, or?
Absolutely, and I could tell by her comments that she's interacted with the police before,
yes.
So I feel her frustration. We are equally frustrated. Sometimes it's just a matter of the law prevents us from doing things that we know are right. I mean, we can't necessarily just kick in people's doors, even though we know or suspect they are. We have to be able to prove it. So it's equally frustrating for us too. But I want to reassure her that, you know, there's never too small of a fish. If you don't feel safe at home, if it's affecting your neighborhood's quality of life, you know, we're there for you. So I would encourage that particular caller to call in at the 645-4616. Leave a message, explain who you are, and I'll see to it that we try to get the resources there that you need.
Sounds great. Well, thank you for all your help on the streets making this happen, and dealing with that narcotics and prostitution, you know, long-term issues, but also sounds like you're making some long-term progress on really putting a dent in these issues within the city of Columbus. So I'd like to thank you, and we're done with our first segment. Our second segment, disaster preparedness. How do we get prepared? How do we deal with these last things that have happened, a train crash and the storms, etc.? So we'll be right back after this moment. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back with you once again. Check in on Facebook and give us a call. See you in just a moment.